rain had been falling on Pittsburgh since dusk. Catherine Whitlock stood behind a double stack of pallets at the loading dock, her company-issued slicker still dripping onto the concrete, her cap pulled low over her eyes. 11 at night. 3 voices carried from the other side of the steel shelving. Men laughing, the words sharp and ugly. They were talking about how to push out the widower with the little girl before the month was out. She tightened her grip on the clipboard. Her breath came out white in the cold. Then Marcus Hale said the name. Holloway. It's time. She did not move. She had been doing this for 3 years now, ever since her father died. He had called it a ghost shift. Once a quarter, you trade the corner office for a slicker and a clipboard. You take a fake name out of a hat, and you go listen to your own company from the floor. Her father had insisted on it for 40 years. He used to say a building can lie to you in a quarterly report, but it cannot lie to you at 2 in the morning when nobody knows you are there. She had picked Pittsburgh because of 3 anonymous complaints over the last 8 months. Each one had been logged, filed, and quietly closed by the regional director. Each one had used the same phrase. Patton? The fake name on her vest read Kathy Voss. She had been there 4 days. Dan Holloway walked the floor differently from the rest of them. She had noticed it the first night. He did not waste a step. He carried 2 pallets where another man would have called for a forklift, and he did it without complaint, without performance. He wore a gray flannel shirt under his vest. There was a bandage taped to the knuckle of his thumb, the kind a man put on himself in the dark, alone. The shift supervisor had paired her with him on the second night. Watch Holloway. He won't talk much, but you'll learn how it's supposed to be done. He had not talked much. But when she had wrapped the first pallet wrong, the stretch film bunching against the corner, he had stopped what he was doing and walked over. You're pulling against yourself, he had said. He had taken the roll from her hand, his fingers cold. Anchor it. 3 turns at the base. Then walk it up. He had handed it back. Like that, you'll save your wrists. That was all. He had gone back to his own line. Around 9, his phone had buzzed in his vest pocket. He had stepped 1 pace away from her, his back half turned. His voice dropped to something a daughter would recognize as the safe voice. Hey, sweetheart. Yeah, I know. I'll be there. I promise. Front row. A pause. I love you too. Get to bed, okay? Mrs. Pearson is staying till I'm home. Another pause. Softer. Yeah, I'll kiss your hair when I get there. Good night, Lily. He had ended the call. He had stood for 1 second with his hand still on the phone in his pocket. Marcus Hale had been walking past at exactly that moment. He had not been walking past by accident. Leaving early again, Holloway? The princess miss her daddy? Dan had nodded once. He had not turned around. He had picked up the next pallet. Catherine had watched the back of his neck, the slow, steady breath he took before he lifted. She had watched and she had understood that whatever she was looking at, it was not fear. It was the discipline of a man who had decided a long time ago that his rage was not for sale. It was something else, too. Something she had only seen in her father once, on the night the company nearly went under in 2008, when he had stood in the lobby at 3 in the morning and told a room of frightened managers that they were going to make payroll on Friday, and he did not know how yet, but they were going to. It was the look of a man who had already paid every price worth paying, and would not be moved. She got back to her apartment in Shadyside at 1:40 in the morning. She did not turn on the overhead light. She poured a finger of bourbon she would not drink, opened the laptop on the kitchen island, and signed into the executive console with the 4-factor authentication her general counsel insisted on. Her father had built that console in 1998. He had been one of the first logistics CEOs in the country to insist that the chief executive should have unfiltered, direct, real-time access to every personnel file, every payroll line, every disciplinary action, every internal complaint, all the way down to the loading dock. He had said the day a CEO stops being able to see the floor is the day the company starts dying without telling anyone. Catherine had inherited the console along with the building. She pulled Daniel R. Holloway's personnel file, 2 years and 3 months at Whitlock Freight, no write-ups, no customer complaints, 3 separate written requests, on company letterhead, asking to be moved to the day shift on account of his daughter starting 3rd grade. All 3 had been denied by the regional director with the same boilerplate sentence about operational need. She read the denials twice. The signature at the bottom was Marcus Hale's. The wording was identical down to the comma. He scrolled to the bottom of the file, to the prior employment section. Most of the field was blank. Where the work history would normally be, there was a single line: prior service. Classified. Department of Defense. Tier 1 designation. C-13 hold for authorized release. Catherine sat back from the screen. She picked up her phone. She had not used this number in 19 months. It was a man her father had played squash with, a deputy undersecretary who had retired into the kind of consulting nobody named out loud. She typed 4 words. Daniel R. Holloway. Pittsburgh. She made coffee. She watched the rain stripe the window. 40 minutes later, her phone lit up with a single sentence. Silver Star. Helmand, 2014. Captain, Special Forces, ODA Team Leader. He bought his quiet with both hands. Don't take it from him. She set the phone face down on the marble. She sat very still in the half-dark for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. A car went by on the street below, tires hissing on the wet pavement. The man who had taught her how to wrap a pallet 4 hours ago, who had taken Marcus Hale's mockery without lifting his eyes, was a decorated officer of the United States Army. He had led men in the worst country on earth and come home with the 3rd highest honor the service could give, and he had spent ounce on his feet, in a warehouse, on the night shift, so that his daughter would have insurance. She thought about the bandage on his thumb. She thought about the careful, almost embarrassed way he had handed her the stretch film and walked back to his own line. A man with a silver star, teaching a stranger he believed to be a temp how to anchor a roll of plastic wrap so she would not hurt her wrists. She did not cry. Catherine Whitlock had not cried at her father's funeral, and she did not cry now. She opened a second tab and pulled the regional overtime ledger for Pittsburgh 3 years back. She set her mug down very carefully. There was a number that did not belong, $1.4 million of it, scattered across 23 months, soft and steady. Exactly the kind of money a careful man would steal if he believed nobody would ever come down to the floor and look. The next night the pallet came down from the second tier of the dock. It was a bad stack, top-heavy, a load that should have been restrapped at intake and had not been. The corner of the top crate caught on the lip of the upper shelf as the forklift pulled away, and for a long quiet second the whole stack leaned out over the floor. A young woman named Raina was bent over the scanner station underneath it. She did not see it. Catherine, 20 feet away, saw it and did not have time to call out. Dan Holloway moved. He came across the floor in 3 strides, not running, not shouting, just crossing the distance the way a man crosses a room he knows the dimensions of. He hooked Raina under the arm and pulled her sideways with one hand, and with the other he put his shoulder up under the corner of the falling crate. The crate hit him at the joint of the shoulder and the neck. He took it the way a man takes something he is trained for, his knees flexing under the weight, his free hand already finding the support post for the leverage to push the crate back against the shelving. He set it down, slowly, not dropped, set. Raina had her hand over her mouth. The whole line had stopped. "You okay?" he asked her. She nodded. She did not seem to be able to speak. "Get some water. Sit down for 10. He brushed dust off his sleeve. He looked over his shoulder at the shift supervisor, who was staring at him. "Top tier needs restrapping." The intake from 3rd shift was sloppy. He went back to his line. That was it. No raised voice, no audit of who had stacked the load, no announcement. He picked his clipboard back up and kept going. Catherine could not pretend she had not seen it. She did not pretend at lunch either. She took her tray out to the picnic bench, under the loading bay awning where he sat most nights, alone, and she set her tray down across from him. He did not look up from his sandwich. "You forgot lunch," he said, after a moment. "How can you tell? You haven't unwrapped anything." He reached into the brown paper bag at his elbow and pulled out an apple. He cut it in half against the bench with a folding knife and handed her the bigger half across the table. "Take it. I had a big breakfast." She took it. The apple was cold and very crisp. She bit into it and watched him in profile while he chewed and looked out at the rain hitting the empty lot. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. He did not ask her last name. He did not ask where she was from. He did not look at her like a man trying to figure out what kind of woman she was. He looked at her like a man eating a sandwich next to another tired human being at midnight in November. For the first time in 11 years, Catherine Whitlock did not know what to say to a man. The write-up came on Thursday. Marcus Hale had Maggie Olson bring Dan into the small glass office at the end of the dock. He had the paperwork already printed. He had filled in the date and the offense and the recommended disciplinary action before Dan walked through the door. Left shift early without filing the proper request, Marcus read, without looking up. 2 weeks ago. 26 minutes before clockout. I filed the request, Dan said. With Maggie, 2 weeks before that, Marcus turned the page around. The request form was not in the file. Maggie's hands were folded on her lap. She looked at the file. She looked at the back of Marcus's head. She opened her mouth. Marcus, without turning, said quietly, "Maggie, how's your brother doing with the new placement?" Maggie closed her mouth. Her eyes filled. Her hands stayed folded on her lap. She picked up the pen. She signed her name as the witness. A tear came down the side of her nose and she did not wipe it. Dan watched her sign. He looked at her face for a long time. Then he reached across the table, took the pen out of her hand gently, and signed his own name underneath hers. His hand tightened on the edge of the table after the pen came down. It was the only thing in his body that gave anything away. Catherine stood at the corner of the glass partition with a stack of receipt slips and pretended to be sorting them. She counted seconds. 12 seconds between when he signed and when he stood up. He walked out of the office. He did not slam the door. He did not look at Marcus. He went back to the floor. That afternoon, she drove out to Glenshaw Elementary in a rental sedan she had picked up under the Voss name. She parked across the street. She watched parents file into the auditorium with their phones held up, looking for the early seats. She did not go in. The recital started at 3. Through the open side door, she could hear the small piano, the shuffle of a teacher counting children into line. A girl with a brown ponytail stepped up to the lone microphone, Lily Holloway, 8 years old. Her dress was a little big in the shoulders. She began to sing. It was an old folk song, something about a sparrow. At 3:03, the back door of the auditorium opened and Dan slipped in, his hair still wet from rinsing off the dock dust, a paper coffee cup forgotten in his hand. He went to the back row. He sat down. Lily was 3 lines into the song. She glanced up. She saw him. Her small face did not break, did not stop singing. The corners of her mouth turned up about 1/4 of an inch. She kept going. Catherine started the car and pulled away before the song was finished. She did not have any right to that moment. She did not want to take it from them. She drove back into the city with the radio off, the windshield wipers ticking, and she did not say anything out loud, but somewhere on the bridge over the Allegheny, her hand on the wheel made a fist and stayed that way the whole way home. She worked the rest of the night, after the ghost shift was over, in her apartment. By dawn she had it. 14 single parents terminated in 18 months, all in the Pittsburgh region, all under Marcus Hale. The boilerplate phrases were nearly identical. Minor attendance infractions, attitude not in line with team values, performance issues uncorrelated with metrics. 3 were veterans. 2 were caregivers to elderly parents. 1 had filed a complaint with HR before she was let go. That complaint had been logged, filed, and quietly closed by the regional director. She pulled their photographs from their badge files and laid them out in a grid on the second monitor. 14 faces, a nurse's aide, a former Marine, a woman who had been with the company for 9 years before her husband died. Catherine looked at each of them for a moment, the way her father had taught her to look at a balance sheet, not the numbers, the shape behind the numbers. The shape behind these numbers was the shape of a man building a private kingdom inside her father's company, one quiet termination at a time. She found Dan's medical debt on a credit report her general counsel was not supposed to be able to pull and did anyway. $47,000 and change. 2 years of his late wife's chemotherapy that the insurance had refused. The collection account was current. He was paying it down in increments of $312 a month. He had not missed a payment. He kept the warehouse job for the insurance. He kept it for Lily. She thought about Lily standing alone at the microphone in the school auditorium, the small straight back, the dress that was a little big in the shoulders. She thought about the 3rd request for a day shift transfer, the 3rd boilerplate denial. That night, in the parking lot after shift, Maggie Olson caught her by the elbow as she was walking to the bus stop. "You're new, right, Kathy?" Catherine nodded. Maggie looked older up close than she did in the office. Her eyes were red-rimmed and tired. "Stay away from Hale," she said. Her voice was very low. "I mean it. Don't let him find out anything about you he can use. Not your family, not your record, not what you owe. He keeps a list. He keeps it in his head, and he keeps it on paper, and he uses it. I'm telling you because nobody told me." She let go of Catherine's elbow. "I'm sorry. I just needed to tell someone tonight." She walked away, across the wet asphalt before Catherine could answer. Catherine stood there a long time under the sodium light. She did not go back to the bus stop. She walked 4 blocks to where she had parked her own car under a different name, and she sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and called her general counsel at home. "Bring me a forensic accountant," she said. "Today. Pittsburgh-based, no internal ties, and a private investigator. The kind who knows what to do with a regional director who likes to keep names on a list." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Her general counsel had worked with her father for 31 years. He did not ask why. By noon, he said. She hung up. She sat in the dark for another minute with her hands on the wheel. She wrote one sentence on the back of a parking ticket and put it in her wallet. "I am not leaving Pittsburgh until this is finished." Frank Bowers found her on a Tuesday. He was 68 years old, a part-timer kept on for his hands and his bad jokes, and he had been a Marine in 1968. He had been watching her, she realized, since she got there. He pulled her aside at the coffee station off the break room. He set a paper cup of black coffee in front of her. "You don't walk like a delivery driver," he said. He was not smiling. He was not unsmiling either. "You walk like a person who's used to people getting out of her way. I've been watching for it. I figured it out about Monday." Catherine's hand went still on the cup. Frank shook his head slowly. "Relax. I'm not going to ask. I don't care which one you are. I care about why you're here." She did not lie. "Marcus Hale," he breathed out through his nose. "Then we're on the same side." He sat down across from her, his bad knee cracking. "You've been watching Holloway, I figure." She nodded. "Let me tell you something about Holloway. 2 winters back, my grandson Eli was inside Eastview Junior High in Erie when a kid walked in with a shotgun. You remember that one? 3 dead, 12 hurt. Eli was in the gym. He was looking at his coffee, not at her. My daughter called me at 1 in the morning. I was here, on shift. I couldn't drive. I was on 3 medications and I had not slept in 2 days, and the roads were sheet ice all the way up the lake. I told Holloway I had to leave. He looked at me for about 2 seconds. Then he said, "Get your coat." Frank stirred his coffee with a plastic stirrer he had already used. He drove me 9 hours through that storm, didn't say more than 10 words the whole way, got me to the hospital in Erie at 10 the next morning. Eli was alive. Shot in the leg, but alive. When we were leaving, Holloway put a check in my hand for $5,000 and walked away before I could say anything. I tore it up in the parking lot, drove home and tried to give him back the pieces. He just looked at me. He said, "You paid that already, Sergeant. 10 years ago." Frank looked up. "Now, here is the part you didn't know. I was his platoon sergeant the year he came in. Before he went off to selection, before he was anybody, I taught that kid how to clean a rifle. He outranked me by the time he was 26, and he never once made me feel it. Not once." The break room hummed under the fluorescents. "He is the best man I ever served with," Frank said. "And Marcus is trying to break him because Marcus has figured out he won't fight back about himself. He'll only fight back about other people. So Marcus is making it about the kid." He pushed the coffee a half-inch toward her. "I am 68 years old, and I have a bad knee and a bad heart, and I do not know what to do with this. So I am telling you. Because you walk like somebody who does." Catherine wrapped both her hands around the paper cup. It was almost too hot to hold, and she held it anyway. She understood, all at once, why Dan Holloway had buried his name in a classified file and gone to work on a loading dock at midnight. He did not consider any of it his. The metal, the patents, the silence, the breath in his own lungs. He considered them debts. He was paying them down the way he paid down the chemotherapy bill every month, $312 at a time, until the ledger was even. She put the coffee back down. "Thank you, Sergeant," she said. Frank's mouth twitched. "Don't mention it, ma'am." Marcus moved on Friday. Catherine watched it happen from her apartment at 4 in the morning, on the remote feed of camera 19. She had pulled the camera credentials 2 days earlier. She had not told her security director why. Marcus came into the dock alone, in his street clothes, after the late shift had cleared. He had a hand truck. He went to the high-value cage at the back, the cage that held the cardiac monitor components and the GPS modules for the medical transport contract. He cut the seal on 12 boxes, slid them onto the hand truck, and wheeled them out the side door to the employee lot. He did not load them into his own car. He loaded them into the bed of Dan Holloway's pickup truck, under the tonneau cover. He shut the cover. He walked back inside and reset the seal. Catherine watched the whole thing from her kitchen island. She did not move while it was happening. She memorized the time codes. At 7 the next morning, Marcus called the security manager and reported that 12 high-value units were missing from the cage, last seen during a third-shift transfer that Daniel Holloway had signed out on. By 8:30, he had the boxes under the tonneau cover photographed by the on-duty guard. By 9, he had Dan in the small glass office. "This is termination for cause, Holloway. Theft. We're not pressing charges out of consideration for the family situation, but you walk out of here today, and you don't come back." Dan looked at him across the table for a long time. Maggie was in the room again. Maggie was the only HR witness on shift. She opened her mouth, and Marcus, without looking away from Dan, slid a manila folder across the desk toward her. The tab said her brother's name on it. Maggie closed her mouth. Her hand on the edge of the table was shaking so hard the file vibrated. Dan looked at Maggie's hand. He looked at Marcus. "Where do I sign?" he said. He signed. He stood up. He went to his locker and put a few things into a small cardboard box, a photograph of Lily on a swing, a laminated saint's medal on a broken silver chain, a piece of notebook paper folded into quarters, the creases soft from years of being opened. He shut the locker. In the corridor outside the office, he passed Kathy Voss, who was pretending to file an inventory slip on the wall clipboard. He stopped. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and took out half an apple wrapped in a paper napkin. He set it on the clipboard ledge beside her hand. "Take care of yourself, kid," he said. He walked out of the building. Catherine stood there for 5 seconds. She did not pick up the apple. She took her cap off. She took her phone out of the inside pocket of her jumpsuit. She stepped 2 paces to the left, so that she was framed exactly in the glass of Marcus Hale's office window. She made eye contact with him through the glass. She dialed. "Megan," she said, in a voice he could hear through the partition. "Wake the jet. Call the board. Pittsburgh Tower, 9th floor conference room, 9 a.m. tomorrow. All of them. I am coming in." Marcus's face did not move for a moment. Then it did. The color went out of it slowly, from the forehead down, like someone had unplugged him from the wall. She held his eyes through the glass for 1 more second. Then she turned and walked out into the rain. The Whitlock Freight Tower sat at the corner of Grant and 7th in downtown Pittsburgh. The 9th floor conference room had a glass wall that looked west over the Monongahela. At 8:59 on Saturday morning, the 7 members of the board were seated around the long walnut table, drinking coffee, checking phones, trying to figure out why an emergency session had been called on a weekend. Marcus Hale was at the far end of the room in his only good suit. He had been told to be there at 8:45, and not told why. At 9 sharp, the door opened. Catherine walked in. Black suit, hair pulled back, no jewelry. The face under the conference room lights was the same face Marcus had seen behind a pile of pallets at midnight on Tuesday. He recognized it the second she crossed the threshold. He went very still. She did not look at him. She walked to the head of the table. She set down a stack of files, 14 of them. She slid them down the table one by one to each board member. "These are 14 wrongful terminations from the Pittsburgh distribution region in the last 18 months. Every one of them is a single parent. Every one of them was signed by the same regional director. The grounds are nearly identical, copy-pasted, and in 11 of the 14 cases the underlying violations did not occur." She slid a second folder down. "This is a forensic accounting report. Over the last 23 months, $1.4 million in overtime budget allocated to Pittsburgh has been routed through a shell consultancy registered in West Virginia to the personal account of a man named Brian Vetters. Mr. Vetters is the regional director's brother-in-law." She did not raise her voice. "This," she said, sliding a thumb drive forward, "is 14 minutes of footage from camera 19, captured early Friday morning. The regional director personally loaded 12 high-value medical components into the truck of an employee he then terminated for theft on Friday afternoon. Marcus opened his mouth. She slid a sheet of paper toward him. The federal seal at the top was real. The signature at the bottom was real. The date was today. "This is a sealed indictment," she said. "Wire fraud, conspiracy, and falsification of federal employment records. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the Western District was kind enough to expedite. I am not the one prosecuting you, Mr. Hale. I am just the one telling you that you do not work here anymore." 2 officers stepped through the conference room door. They were quiet about it. They walked Marcus out the side hallway without cuffs, in front of the 7 members of the board, and Marcus did not look at any of them. He looked at the carpet. Catherine waited until the door closed. Then she said, "Margaret Olson will serve as acting regional director for Pittsburgh, effective immediately. Full investigation of every termination signed by Mr. Hale is to begin Monday morning. The 14 employees on this list are to be contacted today with the option of reinstatement at the same rate, plus 18 months of back pay, plus full benefits restoration. This is non-negotiable." She picked up her phone. She looked at her assistant in the doorway. "Megan, where is Daniel Holloway right now?" "The State Unemployment Office on Butler Street, ma'am. He filed at 8 a.m. Catherine did not call for the company car. She picked up her keys herself. She took the service elevator down to the parking garage. She drove out of the building in the old gray Volvo her father had bought in 1996 and had refused, all his life, to replace. The unemployment office on Butler Street had a brown bench outside the front door for the people who needed to come back out and breathe. Dan was on it. He had filled out the first form. He had the second one across his knee. His coat was the same brown canvas jacket he wore on the dock. Catherine sat down on the bench beside him. She did not say anything for 2 minutes. Neither did he. Finally, he said, without looking up from the form, "Took me a little while. I saw you in the annual report last year. Different hair, but the same hands on the table." He drew a small box around a checkmark on the form. "Whitlock, with a T. I am sorry," she said, "about the deception." He nodded slowly. "I get undercover. I used to live in it." He looked over at her for the first time. His eyes were gray and tired and unsurprised. "Were you the one who got Hale out?" "This morning. 9 a.m., he breathed out. He looked across the street at nothing in particular for a long moment. "Maggie? Acting regional director. As of today." He nodded again. Something in his shoulders dropped a quarter of an inch, almost too small to see. "I want to offer you your job back," she said, "with back pay. A different role. Logistics design at the corporate level. The salary would be 10 times what you were making on the dock, and you could pick your hours. I came to ask." He thought about it. He thought about it for a long time, while a woman in scrubs walked past them into the office and a city bus hissed at the corner. "No," he said, gently. "Thank you. I appreciate it. But no." She did not argue. "I want a year," he said. "With Lily. She turned 8 in August, and I have been working nights for 2 years, and I have missed too much. I am going to take the year, then I will figure out what kind of work I do next." He folded the form in half. "But thank you, genuinely." She nodded. She watched a pigeon walk along the curb. "The Carter-Stillwater Trust," she said quietly. "The patents we licensed through it. The route optimization algorithms. They are yours, aren't they?" He turned his head and looked at her. For the first time since she had met him, Dan Holloway looked surprised. He was quiet for a long time. "They are not mine," he said finally. "They belong to 6 men who did not come home with me from Helmand. 3 of them helped me write the early math. I am holding them in trust. I draw enough to cover what insurance won't, and the rest sits there until I figure out the right thing to do with it. I have not figured out the right thing yet. Why hide it? Because the names on the paperwork are not all mine to use," he said, "and because nobody needed to know." Catherine stood up. She took a small white card out of her coat pocket. There was no title on it, no company name, just a handwritten phone number. She set it down on the bench between them. "When you want to talk," she said, "not about work." She walked back to the Volvo. She did not look back to see if he picked it up. 3 months later, in the second week of December, Pittsburgh had its first real snow. Catherine drove out to Squirrel Hill on a Saturday afternoon with a paper bag of groceries in the passenger seat. She had been telling herself for most of the drive that she just happened to be in the neighborhood. She knew this was not true. She did not particularly care that it was not true. The house on Murray Avenue was small and wooden, and had a string of colored lights along the porch rail. She climbed the 3 steps. She knocked. The door opened almost immediately. "Dad." Lily called over her shoulder, her face already lit up. "It's Kathy." Lily had met Catherine twice before. Once at a coffee shop near the river where Dan had introduced her as a friend, once at a Sunday walk in Frick Park, where Lily had insisted on holding Catherine's hand on the slippery part of the path. Lily did not know about the company. She did not know about the boardroom or the jet or the 24th floor. She knew Catherine as the woman who laughed at the same jokes her father laughed at, and who did not lean down to talk to her like she was 4 years old. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and butter. Lily had a row of Christmas cupcakes lined up on the cooling rack and 3 bags of colored icing on the counter. She put one of the bags into Catherine's hand without asking. "You do the green ones." "Dad is bad at green." Catherine laughed. It was a real laugh, low and surprised. She had not laughed like that in 10 years of running her father's company. Dan was at the sink, drying his hands on a dish towel. He watched the 2 of them across the kitchen island. Lily up on a step stool with a streak of red icing on her cheek. Catherine bent over a cupcake, with the careful focus she had once brought to discounted cash flow models. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he came around the island for a clean towel from the drawer. As he passed behind Catherine, he reached past her to the drawer, and his hand brushed the back of her hand for the length of half a second. She did not move her hand away. He found the towel. He put it on her shoulder, gently, because she had icing on her sleeve. He went back to the sink. "You too?" Lily called, very loud, on her step stool. "You have to come judge. You have to say which one is the best one. Dad says they are all good, but that is a lie." They came over. The 3 of them stood at the kitchen table, looking down at 14 lopsided cupcakes. Outside the kitchen window, the snow was coming down soft, and even over Murray Avenue, over the porch lights and the parked cars and the small wooden houses along the block. Somewhere down the street a dog was barking at the snow. Lily was laughing at her own joke about a cupcake she had named Gerald. There would be no announcement, no headline. The loudest revelations, Catherine Whitlock was learning, were always the quietest. A hand brushing a hand across a kitchen towel, a child's laughter filling a small house in December, a man who had carried the names of 6 dead soldiers for a decade, finally letting someone help him carry the weight of one more name, his own.